Hello and welcome to my first tutorial. Today I'm going to be walking you through step by step how to thread a sewing machine, wind a bobbin and make those first couple of stitches. So you will need to have your machine plugged in and powered on. If you want to take a pause here, just have a look at your manual on how to do those basic steps and then get yourself set up in a nice comfortable position ready to sew. Make sure your foot pedal is down below, easily accessible and easy and comfortable for you to reach. The other things you will need for today's lesson are some thread, a small pair of scissors, a bobbin and just a scrap of fabric to practice on. This is just an old piece from a bed sheet, so it doesn't need to be anything special. So when you sew with a sewing machine you actually use two threads. One feeds off the top of the sewing machine up here and off a spool like this that you'll buy from the shops. The second one feeds off the bobbin. Now the bobbin will come empty and it's your job to transfer some of the thread from this onto this, and that's the first step in our lesson today. So you need to take your thread and on top of your machine you'll have a spool holder. This may be horizontal like mine or it may be vertical, it may stick up from the back of the machine. Slide the thread onto there and you may have a cap to go on the end. That just stops the spool from bouncing around. Now, if you look closely at the top of your machine, the chances are you will have some illustrations on there, some diagrams or numbers or arrows that show which way to thread the machine and which way to wind the bobbin. So hopefully you've managed to locate the diagrams on the top of your sewing machine. If you don't have any numbers or arrows or diagrams, take a look at your manual and you may find the instructions there. If not, bear with me and follow along with the tutorial anyway, because hopefully it will all become clear. So to wind our bobbin, we're going to follow the diagrams that come down this way. On mine, they're a dotted line as opposed to the solid line, which shows me how to thread the machine. So we're going to start by feeding the thread through the clip at number 1 and just checking that it's in there as it should be. Next, the arrows point me in the direction of this dial here. Now, it's really important that you don't just wind the thread around the outside of the dial like that. It's not correct, and if you do so, the tension on your bobbin will be wrong and you won't have any success in sewing. So have a look at the diagram and you'll see it tells you the thread should go around the inside and then out and round. I'll do that once again just to show you slowly. Once you've got the thread wrapped around the dial, you need to thread your bobbin. So with a plastic bobbin like mine, you have a small hole in the top. You need to thread the thread from the inside to the outside. Okay. Hopefully you can see that there. The thread is going through the middle of the bobbin and up out the top. If you're using a metal bobbin, you can thread it through any one of those holes on the outside. What we're then going to do is to place the bobbin onto the bobbin winder, push it down, you'll feel it kind of lock into place, and then a really important step, you have to push the bobbin winder over and you will feel it sort of click into place, so you'll know it's as far across as it should go. This step is really important. It tells your sewing machine that you're actually going to be winding your bobbin and not sewing. What I would then do is just lightly hold this thread that's loose at the top. Some people do like to wrap it around the bobbin itself before they start to wind. I find when I do that I end up with quite a messy bobbin, so I just hold on to it lightly. Do be careful not to wrap it around your fingers because the bobbin will spin quite quickly now and you can find yourself getting cotton caught quite tightly around your fingers. So once you're ready to go, just hold that quite firmly and put your foot down on the pedal and let it go. Now you can keep on winding that until it actually starts to slow down by itself, and when the bobbin is full it will stop. What you need to do then is just to snip away the thread there, and also this piece of thread that you were holding on to, snip that away very close to the top, because what you don't want to do is end up with two pieces of thread hanging off your bobbin. Now we can slide this back across and lift it up, and you see you have one wound bobbin. So your front loading bobbin is hidden behind this accessory tray, which just slides out. This flap here opens to reveal the bobbin casing and the bobbin holder. There's a small lever there which you can just grab hold of and pull out. And this is your bobbin holder. So take your bobbin that you wound. Now what's very important here is that you get your thread coming off in the right direction. For a machine like this, it should go anti-clockwise like this. Hold the bobbin holder upright so this little arm is facing upwards, and slide the bobbin in like so. Now take your thread, and you'll notice it's actually got in there already. There's a small groove in the bobbin holder. You want to pull your thread through that groove and then pull it in the opposite direction, and you will see that it goes underneath this little metal clip, and you just want to pull it until it clicks through, and then it's coming out of that hole just here. Okay, and then you should just be able to dangle the bobbin by the thread quite nicely like that to know that it's in correctly. Okay, you want to leave this long thread hanging to the front, and you want to reinsert your bobbin holder back in the way it came out, so making sure that this arm is nice and upright. And when you push it in, you should hear a large click. If you don't hear that large click, it's not in correctly, and when you turn the needle down, it will just push the bobbin straight back out, and it may damage the needle. So make sure you hear that really loud click and you know that it's in firmly. This thread can just be left here for a moment. We're going to do something with that after we've threaded the machine. So we can just leave that there, and that is your bobbin wound and loaded. So now it's time to thread your machine. Now before you get started on threading the machine, I would just give you two little pieces of advice. First of all, your presser foot, which is this part down here that holds the fabric in place as you sew, this needs to be raised when you're threading your machine. You should have a lever underneath or at the back of your machine which will make that rise and fall like so. So make sure that's up before you start threading. And also you'll see in this larger of the two grooves here, there's a little metal sort of hook with a hole in. If you turn the hand wheel on your machine, you should see that start to move inside. You keep turning the hand wheel towards you until you see it just rise up there to the top of the groove. And then you're ready to get threaded. So your thread is already in place from when you wound the bobbin. It's around this dial though. We don't use this dial when we're threading the machine. So you can unwind it from there. You can, however, leave it in place in this first hook that you can just see behind the dial there, because that's part of our threading route as well. So don't forget, refer to the diagrams on the machine or in your manual. We're going to go underneath hook number 2, and then we're going to pull the thread down through this first channel. Now I'm following the numbered arrows 1, 2, 3 down to 4, which is telling me to go under and back up this second channel. Now as I get to the top, this little arm that we rose through turning the hand wheel, there's a hole in that the thread needs to go through. But on this particular machine, you don't actually need to guide it through. Some more simple machines may actually require you to thread the cotton through the hole directly, but on this machine, you can just pull it to the back, across to the side, and back down the other side of that same channel, and it will automatically catch in the hole in there. So we pull this all the way down to step number 6. Now step number 6, you might struggle to see from this angle, but I'll do it from a separate angle in a moment, is to catch the thread underneath the little hook at the top of the needle. And then all that's left to do is to thread the cotton through the eye in the needle itself. And we always do this from front to back. So I'm just going to show you that again from a different angle. So we're already in this first hook. I'm going to go under number 2, down this first channel, up and under, around to number 5, watch as it catches on that hole there, and then down to number 6. Now this pattern of going across here, down, back up and round and down again is very common on most sewing machines. So though your machine may be different to mine, you'll find this kind of pattern of threading as you go through. Just in a little bit more close-up detail, I'll show you that last couple of steps. So you're hooking through that hook there above the needle and then threading. And what I always do before I thread the whole of the needle is just snip the end of the thread with a nice neat pair of scissors, just so you're not fighting against loose threads, and straight through the needle and out to the back, which is always easier said than done. Okay, so now we have 2 threads, top thread, bobbin thread. We need to bring them both together. So what you do is you take a steady hold of this top thread, and using your hand wheel at the side, by turning your hand wheel towards you, you watch as you turn it, your needle will slowly lower, keep turning, and then as your needle comes back up, so you're still turning towards you, your needles come up, you just gently start to pull on this top thread, and as you do, you'll see your bobbin thread miraculously pulls up through the loop. Now, if it doesn't come right up through the loop by itself, you can just take a small piece of thread or something like this underneath your presser foot to pull it through. What you will ultimately end up with is 2 threads underneath your presser foot, and just give them a nice big tuck towards the back, so you've got a nice long bit of extension. You may be conscious of wasting thread doing that, but if you don't have a nice long tail there as you start to sew, you will find that your machine miraculously unthreads itself. So just have a nice long trail there. So we can close the cover, replace our accessory tray, and we're ready to sew. Well, congratulations. If you've followed me along so far, you have managed to wind your bobbin, load your bobbin and thread your machine. So the only thing left to do is to have a little practice. So take your scrap of fabric and fold it in half, because obviously when you're sewing, you're normally sewing 2 pieces of fabric together. So to really make sure your machine is working, you want to kind of test it on the fabric you're going to use. And that's a good tip actually, whenever you are sewing, if you've got some material that you're going to be working on, if you can afford to spare a little scrap just to test your stitching out on first, and then that's a really good idea, because you'll find that your machine will behave in different ways depending on what fabric you're using. So what we're going to do is we're going to place our fabric underneath the presser foot. I'll turn the light up a second just so you can see that a little bit better. Okay. And I'm not going to worry too much about where I'm placing it yet, or sewing close to the edges. We'll leave that for another tutorial. This is just for you to practice your stitching. So remember earlier we rose the presser foot to thread our machine. We're going to pop that back down now, and that's going to help hold our fabric in place as we sew. Now, I've got a number of dials on my machine. You may have more, you may have less. This one is my tension, which I'm not going to touch unless I've got a big problem. And to be honest, even then I try not to touch it because it works as it is, and I'm going to leave it that way. I've got a stitch width selector, but I'm going to be sewing a straight stitch now, so I'm not going to use that. This is my stitch length, so it goes from 0 to 4. I tend to leave it around about 2.5 just for normal stitching. And these are my stitch selectors, so I can choose between a straight stitch or a zigzag or lots of other fancy top stitches, stretches, stitches, etc. Today I'm just leaving it on a straight stitch, which is a dashed line. This is my reversing button, which I can hold down if I want to sew backwards, and it's very useful for tying your thread in a knot when you first start sewing. But again, we're just practicing some stitching today, so we won't worry too much about all of those tricks. So before I start sewing, what I want to do is make sure my presser foot is down, and then I'm actually going to use my hand wheel slowly to turn it forward, just to get my needle down to make sure my needle is in the right place where I want to start my sewing. I'm going to turn it back on now so the light will come back on, but hopefully you can see well enough. And I've got my pedal on the floor down below, so and as I take my foot off the pedal, it stops. Now if you want to turn around and go back in another direction, you can lift the presser foot up whilst your needle is down in the fabric. Turn the fabric, put your presser foot back down, sew some more. Making sure my needle is down, lift my presser foot up, turn the fabric around and press the foot down. Now, if I lift my needle up, if I really wanted to here, I could start experimenting with different stitches. So give a zigzag a try. I may want to change my stitch width then. But if you want to play with your stitches, I'll leave that up to you. So now you know that you're set up and working, you know what to do. Give it a try, find some scrap fabric, have a little experiment, see what different options of stitches you've got on your machine, and let me know how you get on. Good luck!